Hi, we're going to talk about Chapter 4, the ethics around healthcare and the legalities. We've talked before that healthcare workers have a scope of practice that's dictated by the law. And so you have to stay within that scope of practice. That's why none of you guys are going to be able to dish out medications or give injections or anything, because you don't have certification or licensure, so it's not within your scope of practice to do anything like that. It's actually not only unethical to do that, it's illegal as well. Those codes of conduct limit the practice, and every state has their own set of codes of conduct and scope of practice. The Nurse Practice Act in particular has specific laws that govern what nurses can and cannot do. Along with those kinds of things, their ethics, really the definition of it is that they're the principles and values that determine your behavior. You do have to have, when you're being an ethical professional, respect for cultural, societal, and ethical differences of the clients you work with. Of course, you have to practice within the guidelines of the law, and you have to look at the regulations for every type of employment, whether you're working within a facility or out in the community or whatever. And morals come into play. Morals are based on the experience, religion, and philosophy of the individual or society, and morals aren't governed by law the way scope of practice is, but they play heavily into your code of conduct for sure. Here's a whole list of what's involved in a code of conduct, and I won't read it all to you, but basically you want to deliver the optimum care that you can for a patient. So you want to make sure that you are always operating within the code of ethics and then yielding to other professionals who may not overstep your bounds and into some other profession. You have to stay current in your field, and you really can't be a competent healthcare worker unless you commit to being a lifelong learner. You really have to do that because it's going to continually change, which is what makes healthcare so exciting and so interesting. It's never the same kind of thing. You're actually ultimately going to be expected as a professional to actually be involved in your professional activities and professional organizations so that you can stay up on it and also stay connected and stay networking with other people in your field. So you'll have a lot of professional responsibilities when you ultimately get your licensure certification. There's a term called liable in relation to healthcare and the law, and that term means that a person who's a healthcare provider is legally responsible for their behavior and any care that they give. And then the terms negligent and malpractice, I'm sure you've heard before, but in relation to healthcare, if a healthcare provider acts in a way that is not reasonably prudent, that is the term or definition of negligence. And if they do not use best practice or they operate outside their scope of practice, that's malpractice. So malpractice liability. It's considered malpractice when healthcare workers, again, perform skills that are beyond their level, or they neglect to do something that a reasonable healthcare worker would do, or something that's commonplace. And it all comes back around to documentation. We'll talk a lot about documentation when we're out on rotation, but basically the rule of thumb is if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. So it's very important to make sure when you become a healthcare professional that documentation piece is not overlooked, because it really is the only backup you're going to have if any of your practices come under question. Confidentiality. This is a huge issue. Everything that happens in healthcare is confidential when it's in relation to any patient. And all of their information that happens in any kind of clinical setting in the community or in the hospital, it's always private. So much so that patients don't even have to give their name when they get admitted to a hospital. They can just be given a number. So a healthcare worker is ethically responsible to maintain that patient's privacy. Confidentiality is so important that, again, anything that a patient shares or that happens to a patient or that you observe on a patient cannot be shared with anyone who's not directly involved with that patient's care. So your coworkers, your classmates from the morning class or your classmates from the afternoon class are not directly involved with this patient's care. You cannot tell them the things that you see and hear. Very difficult to do. So you must really always be conscious of what happens in the hospital and on rotation stays there. We talk about it within class or maybe at a post-conference while we're in the hospital in a private area that nobody can hear, but it's not up for common discussion. So when I hear from a morning student that the afternoon student told them about the appendix that they saw taken out the next day, you can be sure that that student who shared that information is going to be on the cutting chopping block and won't be able to remain in the program, because this is one of those deal breakers that absolutely we cannot tolerate. Because of the fines connected with this, nobody can afford that $10,000 per infraction fine. Huge issue. Comes back to the HIPAA law, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. In 1996, it was established to make electronic health records more available, but also the realization of putting it out there in some kind of digital form jeopardizes people's privacy. So you have to make sure that any kind of information that makes it highly identifiable. Maybe you saw a baby be born at the Arnett. Well, what if only one baby was born at the Arnett on that day? You've just shared information about the one patient that happened to. So the cooler the thing is that happens, the more likely it's the only thing that happened, that someone could bring back around and connect to that patient. So it's very important that you never violate that confidentiality or the HIPAA law. There's also legal directives around law and ethics in healthcare that allow people to express what they want ahead of time, and those are called advance directives. And two examples of the advance directives are a living will, which allows a person to say in advance what they want to have happen, if they want to be on life support, if they want to be fed, if they want to have just hydration. And then the durable power of attorney that allows another person to make the decisions for them if they're unable to. And those are things that are done for people when they're still in their right state of mind. But a lot of people don't do these, and then they run into trouble with the families do about what to do now that somebody's really sick or somebody can't speak for themselves. So those are definitely things to be taken care of early on. Here's some elements of advanced care. Again, like I said, artificial nutrition, hydration. Do they want to have CPR done? Do they want to be put on a ventilator? How long do they want to prolong their life? Do they want to at least make sure they're pain-free? Do they want to donate any of their organs? So those are the kind of things that are advanced directives. And that's all. Only 7 minutes.